participants are joining remotely. The public session of the meeting has been recorded, and the recording will be available to the public on request for 2 years following the meeting. Members of the public are also welcome to observe the public session of the Commission's meeting. And to those who are joining the meeting today, thank you for taking the time to join us. You're welcome, but please remember that you're here to observe, not to participate. Please keep your camera off and your microphone on mute at all times. For Commission members, just to remind you, join your meeting remotely. Please keep your camera on wherever possible, but keep your microphone on mute. Don't do what I do. If you wish to speak, use the raise hand function. It's a very good function for us to help us call you in order. And please do not use the chat function for discussion unless you're having a technical issue to prevent you from speaking. May I also ask those who are speaking during the meeting, whether online or here in person, to speak clearly and loudly for the benefit of the recording and for colleagues who have a reduced hearing. Okay, so that takes us to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. Any apologies?
So we have no apologies today.
Any declarations of connections? I declare connection with Fife Director of Property Alan Hall, and connection with Kirky Brock from the Promise. Both are on alternate boards that I sit on, but not direct reports or direct works of activity that I'm involved with. Okay. Can I, as normal, ask the approval that the business items 10 to 16 as taken in the minute and the agenda as taken in private? Agreed. Thank you. That takes us then to the minutes arising from the last board. Can I ask Sarah to pick up?
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that on this occasion, because of the short period of time between meetings, the meetings weren't shared in advance with members, so we will be making amendments to the minute. There's a number of things that have already been raised. We were asked to specify who was attending online and at Westport, so we'll make sure that correction is or that is updated. Under item 9, the Controller of Audits update. The minute, as currently stands, says there is no progress on recommendations in relation to Manager Council. It should actually say the Controller of Audit said that she did not have a current update on the progress of recommendations, so we'll make sure again that change is made. There was some erroneous references to Aberdeen instead of East Wren under item 10. We will make sure that those are removed. And I know under the discussion on health and social care, Mike, you had asked that there is some exploration done on the kind of unmet need in social care, and we'll come back to you on the strategies at the strategy seminar in terms of work to look at that, given the concerns in relation to eligibility criteria. So would members like to raise any other matters for accuracy, and I'm happy to take any questions on the minute.
Questions? Or assuming intent to approve the minute as amended. Thank you. But then takes us to item 5, which is the best value for Fife Council, one of the key agenda items today. This is a statutory report by the Controller of Audit on best value in Fife Council. This report draws attention to the findings from the Council's 23-24 annual audit report and how effectively the Council demonstrates best value. The Commission is invited to consider and approve the Controller's report in this session. The Controller and the audit team are here to provide any clarifications or answers to questions that members may have. The Controller's report and the annual audit report as it relates to best value. We will then consider in private later today how we wish to proceed. So if I can hand over to Helena and the auditors. Helena.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. I just double check that everybody can hear me okay. Yep, excellent, thank you. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present my report on best value at Fife Council to the Accounts Commission today. And I thank Karen, who's joined me this morning, and the audit team at Assets for all their work on the audit to date. Fife Council has gone through a significant amount of change since its best value assurance report in 2018 at both the political and office level. Throughout, the Council has demonstrated a commitment to continuous improvement, and all but 2 of the previous BVAR recommendations have now been marked as completed. Given the scale of change, however, it has made assessing the pace and depth of improvement harder, as some of the changes have yet to fully bed in. Performance reporting is one such example. Here, the Council has undertaken significant work to strengthen performance reporting in light of auditors' recommendations in 22-23, resulting in the clearer presentation and availability of performance information. And the auditor is now satisfied that the Council meets the needs of the Statutory Performance Information Direction. How the Council uses this information to drive improvements in performance will be key going forward. The Council's 2024 performance report shows that the gap between most and least deprived areas is worsening for almost all outcomes tracked. Looking more widely at the local government benchmarking framework, the Council have identified that in overall terms, around 40% of local government benchmarking framework indicators have improved relative to the family group and Scotland's averages. In terms of financial sustainability, the Council has been in a relatively fortunate position compared to others and has managed to balance its budget annually without the need to make significant savings or draw significantly on uncommitted reserves. However, that position is now looking incredibly challenging. The Council encountered significant pressures during 24-25, which they are still actively managing. This feels like a crucial turning point. Looking ahead, their medium-term financial strategy highlights a potential cumulative budget gap of 46.5 million by 2027-28. The Council acknowledges that significant change and difficult decisions now need to be made. The Council has moved to a 3-year planning horizon to help drive forward service redesign and transformation, and is looking to agree change plans by March of this year. The Council must ensure this work is prioritised and, crucially, that it has the mechanisms in place to ensure that tough decisions can be made. The Council has embedded a culture of community engagement and has well-developed consultation tools. Looking ahead, it will need to consider how these can be applied to its challenging fiscal reality. And I'll stop there, but of course, very happy to take further questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Helena. Thank you for that. As has become the norm with these reports, we have agreed a set of questions under a number of headings. So for those who are listening in, we have 5 headings, 4 headings: finances, the performance of the council itself, the transformation programs and activities, the effectiveness of the leadership, and finally on its workforce planning. So can I ask for starting off with finances, can I ask Derek to open up with his question on finances for this council?
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the report, Helena. I think there's a number of good things in the report, but yes, just acknowledging your introduction, I think there's some challenges as well. I would have to confess, when I first read the report, to being slightly flummoxed. I think the Commission is used to recognising the challenging financial position that all councils are facing just now. And you maybe slightly covered this in your introduction, Helen, was saying Fife seemed to be slightly different. So I suppose I had a very basic question to start off with. How have Fife managed their budget position over the last few years? Because they do seem to be in a better position than many other councils that we've looked at. And I was struck by the comment that they seem to have achieved that without material service savings. So it'd be interesting to know how they've achieved that. And I would like to then go on to look at the sort of financial strategy going forward and use of reserves, etc. But I think it might be quite helpful just to cover that point initially, Helen, if you have any further information about it.
Thanks, Derek. And I'll bring in Karen from the audit team to talk a little bit about that historic approach to managing budgets. But I think, like you, that feels like the most striking point at this point, that they have managed to manage their budgets in previous years without having to make significant savings. But I think at this point going forward, obviously the medium-term financial strategy sets out a much more challenging position going forward. But Karen, do you want to give a bit more of a historical picture?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, of course. I think from our perspective, one of the pivotal years was 22-23, where the council reported a more favourable position on its financial outturn of amounting to circa 72 million, and a part of that was to do with the adoption of the financial flexibilities, but they were also reporting an underspend position on services of around about 27 million. And that was predominantly around about the underspend of specific grant funding, and also services were experiencing challenges in recruiting staff, and that had contributed to the underspends as well. So it was quite a stark position in 22-23, as I say, in terms of the outturn position. The council did reflect on that, and in 23-24 worked up and took the decision to actually almost rebase the service budgets, which is why the position in 23-24 looks more in line with previous years, but they are still in that position, as you say, that they continue to report service underspends. But the forecast position actually for 24-25 is reporting a forecast overspend. The council also does reflect the fact that in comparison to other councils, they do feel like they are about to face those challenges that other councils have faced, but they are almost behind where other councils are, but they are, as I say, forecasting and anticipating that they are going to face those challenges. But how they have become in a position that they have been in a more favourable position is through that management of the services.
Can I? I've got everything. Apologies. Okay, I think that's sorted. My end. Apologies for that. Can I just pick up on that? In order to balance the books, and they're managing their services, does that mean they're not delivering services that they were delivering before, or are making it harder to get the services? But that's how they've managed to balance the books. Can you see?
We've no evidence to suggest that they've either stopped services or cut services. They are continuing to deliver the services that they had set out to do.
Thank you.
Could I maybe come back then, Jo? I mean, I think it's important that as a commission we understand the context of where the council's got to in terms of then going forward to look at this medium longer term challenges that they're facing. So I think if I've got this correct, there has been a sort of history, or at least over recent years, a history of underspending. They've used the financial flexibility, so they've been able to balance the books by taking money out of the system to meet some of the costs and demand-led pressures that they've had to face without actually portraying that as a cut in service as something. So they've maybe been in a fortunate position, or better than most. It may be to do with the scale of the council or not. So maybe a couple of follow-on questions that link from just trying to understand the medium-term financial strategy. You mentioned in your answer the acknowledgement the council's facing some real difficulties. I would still probably have to say the numbers that are quoted in the first, although they're quite large, for a council the scale of Fife, they don't strike me as being overly material in that wider context. But I'd be interested to know, how is the case? What I haven't seen in your report is how the council's planning to cover that, so what action it's going to take to address that financial position. And linked with that would then be its reserve strategy. So I think your report's highlighted quite significant reserves for the council. So again, it'd be helpful. I recognise that they've used reserves in the past to deal with some years' budgets, but it'd be interesting to know, do they have a reserve strategy for the immediate future? How is that aligned to the medium-term financial forecast? And what actions are the council taking to address some of the acknowledged service pressures that they have and to achieve balanced position? Thanks.
Thanks, Derek. And I'll bring Karen in a moment, particularly to talk about the reserves picture, because I think it is quite a complicated picture around reserves. And I know that the Commission has called on greater transparency around how councils are using reserves. And in Five's case, when they set their budgets, they set out a net budget which has already taken account of the use of earmarked reserves, which I think is something that the Commission will obviously be interested in. But I'll bring in Karen to talk particularly around the historical use of reserves and how the council reports on that. In response to the first part of your question, though, in relation to the medium-term financial strategy, I think you're absolutely right. Five isn't alone in forecasting quite a significant gap in its medium-term financial strategy in the years ahead. But as I outlined in my opening remarks, for me, this feels like a turning point for the council, because quite often when I'm talking to the Commission about the gaps that councils have, I'm able to refer back to the track record that councils have in terms of delivering savings. I think for me, that's what is different in Five's case, in that they haven't had to make significant savings in the past, as we've already discussed, but they are predicting them that they need to make them in the future, and I think that is what sets this slightly apart for me. As I mentioned before, the council do recognise the size of the gap and the challenge ahead, but have not yet set out their plans to address the budget gap in future years. They're going through that process at the moment of developing their directorate and service change plans, which are due to report March this year. And I think it's going to be crucial to see how those are aligned with the medium-term financial strategy looking ahead. But I'll bring in Karen specifically to talk through the reserves picture. Thanks.
Thank you, Helena. So the council does have large reserves balances, but it does categorise them into three different elements. It has its uncommitted balances, it has its earmarked balances, and it has committed balances. So the earmarked balances are predominantly for example, grant funding that they've received that they've not yet utilised, and they're earmarking it for the point in time that it will be utilised. Commitments are for expenditure that they see coming down the line that they are in effect ring-fencing or committing the balances for. And then they have their uncommitted balances, which are there for unforeseen circumstances. The uncommitted balances are typically set at 2% of the net expenditure budget, and it's based on a 3-year rolling period. What we have seen over the years is that element has been declining, and when the council are reporting on their financial position, they are continually monitoring that level to make sure that it is aligned to the target, but they have been reporting that it has been fallen under that target, and they have been starting to take corrective action to build up those uncommitted reserves. As Helena said, the council does monitor and set its budget on a net expenditure budget, and when I say that, that includes the services performance, and it shows how that net expenditure budget is funded, and that does include an element of transfer from the earmarked and committed reserves. So when they are monitoring with taken account of some of those earmarked reserves that had been earmarked for example, the use of previous ring fence grant funding. So in terms of they're managing their financial position, and they are reporting to members any movement in the net expenditure budget, but also they do report on the forecast position for the uncommitted balances as well in their monitoring reports that they report to Cabinet.
Just to come in finally, Derek, you asked about the reserves policy. And again, Karen might want to say a bit more about this, but the council does have a reserves policy, which is to maintain 2% over a rolling period of 3 years. I believe at present, Karen, they're at 1.3%. So that's within there because it's a 2-year roll. It's a 3-year rolling period. But obviously, that's something that they'll be wanting to pay close attention to.
Derek,
Thank you.
Does
Nice.
that give you the comfort, does that give you the comfort, Derek, you needed?
It does. Thank you, Joe. No, it's been helpful to tease that out. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got 2 requests for questions to follow up. So Christine and then Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Hannah and Karen, for the report. It's really going back to the question that Derek asked about, and I'm still struggling to understand the financial aspect of it because finance isn't my forte in this field. So they've done this in the past by efficiencies, would you say then, or natural wastage without changing any of the service provision? Would that be a layman's way of looking at it?
I think so. It's I think it's largely due to where the council is. So, for example, they haven't had to set savings targets for the individual services, and they haven't savings targets or efficiencies. They haven't had to set those in the previous years.
Okay.
So it is more about how those services are able to deliver within the confines of the budget that they set at the start of the year. And in particular for 22-23, one of the main factors that actually they reported a favourable outturn was because they had vacancies and challenges within the staffing establishment.
Can I ask another question based on that, Joe? So is it possible, and I mean, that they didn't do something that they'd intended to do with the money they'd budgeted? I mean, I'm trying to explain it as I'm seeing it. Does that make sense to you? You know, had they provision to do something that they chose not to do at all that you're aware of?
We're not aware that they stopped the delivery of any service. There may have been, for example, if they received funding for certain projects and they weren't able to deliver those projects, then they have earmarked those reserves to enable them to utilise that money for the point in time that they can actually deliver those services.
So I am really, where I'm coming from is I'm trying to look at the position of councils that we're asking for transformation in. Is it possible that what they've done has delayed any transformation project because they haven't started it, but they've had the budget set aside to do it? So it's not a matter of cutting services or stopping services, they perhaps haven't done something that they'd intended to do.
Can I pick up on transformation later? Christine, I'll try and keep going with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I'll pick that up later if that's okay.
That's really the tenet of why I was asking the finance question. Thank you.
Mike?
Thanks very much. And I mean, like others, I think there's a lot of indications of good performance in here, and I welcome the fact that the reports covered some up-to-date information on the financial position, which I think is is very welcome. I suppose just to footnote on Christine's question, the question for me is, as much when we come to performance and transformation, is has this position left Fife with more scope to take the sort of measures that other authorities have already taken, or not? And I note that there's no loss of. It says in the report that there are no. That there's been no reduction in staff during this period, which is, I think, quite a strong indication of sort of steady state. I had one broader question, which is, in the medium-term financial strategy, the sort of 3-year 2027-28 shortfall is around 50 million, and that's based on flat cash from Scottish Government. Now, in principle, as from what I can see from the finance circular, the Scottish Government increasing the allocation from them is around 50 million. So, and that's with a 3% council tax increase. So I suppose my question is, how valid are the projections given the expected budget allocations? I did want to pick up on IJBs because it's identified in the report as the biggest financial risk. There's clearly some that have been very significant difficulties last year, and it would appear this year. It's a little surprising that in a what I think is a coterminous council that the sort of the degree of coordination around this in the past has been perhaps inadequate. I'd like to understand where the IJB position, how it feeds into the overall picture. And I note from other documentation that the reserves position of the IJB is very close to zero. So any further calls are likely to be on the two the board and the council. So to understand the impact of the IJB on the financial sustainability picture is really what I'm interested in. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. And I'll bring Karen in to talk a little bit more about particularly the relationship between the IJB and the council as well. But I think as you've highlighted, health and social care is an area with significant overspends. In 23-24, there was a deficit position of around 5 million after using around 12 million of reserves. It looked like in 24-25, they have struggled to deliver the savings target. This is just within the IJB. And as a result of the medium-term planning on the IJB, they are projecting significant budget gaps and the need to make some very challenging savings in the years ahead. So I think this is clearly an area of considerable pressure. I would highlight that the IJB have conducted a lessons learned exercise and produced a report outlining corrective actions. And there are monthly meetings between the senior finance staff across the partnership to allow that greater scrutiny of financial controls and financial management. But I think this is clearly an area of significant challenge. I'll bring in Karen to talk a little bit more there about how the practicalities of how that is being managed and that link to the medium-term financial strategy, as you've said.
Thank you. I will maybe go back and reflect on 23-24 and give you a wee bit of context to actually what the financial position looked like for 23-24. And you're right in saying that actually it's a coterminous area for Fife. So Fife Council, NHS Fife and Fife Integration Joint Board are the three parties involved in this. in 23-24, at the time that the IJB set its budget, there was a direction to NHS Fife to transfer 10.8 million over to Fife Council. NHS Fife did not actually transfer that money over to Fife Council, which triggered the start of the pressures on actually all three bodies. They do have an integration scheme in place, and the integration scheme noted that, or required that, any overspend position should firstly be met from the IJB reserves, and then if it's not covered by the IJB reserves, then there's a risk sharing agreement in place where both NHS Fife and Fife Council have to make fit the shortfall. So in 23-24, the IJB in effect utilised all the reserves that it had. So going into 24-25, the IJB now no longer has any reserves in place, and any overspends will now need to fall through the risk sharing agreement between NHS Fife and Fife Council. As Helena said, that they did the IJB commission or carried out a lessons learned review last year and looked to implement a recovery plan. Early indications suggest that actually the recovery plan is not delivering what it set out to do. The IJB is forecasting a large overspend, and that will ultimately have consequences on both NHS Fife and Fife Council in terms of the position for them in 24-25.
Thanks, Karen. And I think what this is signalling is quite a big issue around the IJB impact on the council and its finances. And I'm conscious that, Christine, if you've got another question that's taken up further forward, or is there anything particular you wanted to pick up?
Yeah, my question to Karen is, so they've just put off until the reserves are gone the inevitable of going into a process where both partners are going to have to come up with the goods, or there's going to have to be some sort of dispute resolution according to the scheme. Is that right?
So they in the position in 23-24, my understanding is that it happened quite late in the end of the financial year.
I see. Yeah.
So they did take action in terms of that was the position that they had to utilise those reserves. And on the back of that, that's why they drove forward with the lessons learned and the recovery plan.
Yeah.
But as I say, the recovery plan is not delivering.
Mike, is there anything particular you want to pick up on? Because I'm conscious we've got quite a lot of other topics to cover off.
Yeah, I did just want the question about what about the impact. I mean, how valid are the figures we're looking at in terms of the budget gap? That's what I'm still really interested in, both in the context of the allocations they have from Scottish Government, which I think we can pretty much rely on now after the first reading of the budget, and the impact of the quantum of the impact of the IF of the integration joint boards effect.
Mike, I'm conscious this is about the review of their audit from 23-24. It's not about their budgets looking forward. I think there's an issue for us to consider that, but I'm not sure that the auditors can necessarily answer that question with any degree of audit certainty at this stage. Am I wrong or am I right?
I mean, all I would point to is that the budget discussions are still ongoing at this point, I think, unless Karen tells me that that's not the case. But yeah, so I think the question of future, the 24-25, sorry, forgot what year we're in, 25-26 budgets is still very much an ongoing discussion.
Okay. Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If it's okay, I'd like to ask a question about the housing revenue account, the HRA, if we can move on. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's obviously a slightly different aspect to the finances, but there's a fairly significant budget gap in the HRA, and I think probably an understandable reluctance to pass more than 5% on to the tenants, but failing to deal with it will obviously have an impact on tenants as well. So I'd just like to understand a wee bit more about what the council's doing to address the gap and any work they're doing with the tenants in that respect. Thanks.
Thanks, Malcolm. And you're absolutely right that page 55 of the annual audit report actually sets out some of the difficult decisions that the council needs to take in relation to housing revenue account. And I'll bring in Karen to provide an update on that. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. You're right. HRA we're highlighting as a challenge to the council as well. I suppose a more up-to-date position for 24, 25, 25, 26 is that they are forecasting a budget gap, and they are having to look at decisions on how they address that budget gap coming forward. And one of the ways that they look to do that is rental increases. So they have been surveying tenants in relation to rental, and whether or not there would be any indicative increases in rent this year. The results of that consultation were due at the end of January, and it will inform the budget setting considerations for 25-26, which the council's meeting to consider council tax increases, and the 25-26 budget is the 20th of February. Can I also just make a couple of remarks on going back to the medium-term financial strategy? The council utilise or provide the medium-term financial strategy to elected members so that they have an indication of what the future financial outlook could be, to help them inform their decisions when they're setting the budget for the coming year. So the figures are very indicative, and they are based on assumptions that the council has built in itself. They do typically take their medium-term financial strategy to Cabinet twice a year, and they will update as and when information comes forward. So if there's anything about the financial settlement, they will then incorporate that and update the medium-term financial strategy.
That's helpful, thank you. I'm going to turn now to performance, and I'll turn to Ruth to start us off with the first questions on performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, quite an interesting bit of a mixed picture on performance, so it'd be helpful to get a little bit more understanding on your take on that. Good to see a real response in terms of improving the performance reporting and how that's being done. But there is quite a difference between the overall local government benchmark and benchmarking frameworks. 60% of indicators improved over time, but in relation to the family groups and Scotland as a whole, the performance was less good at around 40%. And it would be good to understand how Fife is addressing that. And also in some of the kind of key service areas like children's services and adult social work, again, the performance indicators are lower there, and it would be helpful to kind of understand how that is being addressed and what the kind of situation is that's allowing that to happen, I suppose, because there's some good things in there, but there's also, you know, looking across to other council areas, quite a gap, I think, in terms of performance. And I couldn't quite work out from the report how that was being addressed or taken forward. So it'd be good to hear a bit more about that if possible.
Thanks, Ruth. And I'll bring in Karen to talk a bit more about some of the local context in particular. But I think my sense is the same as that you've outlined, that that the LGBF data is showing a mixed picture. I think what's also really interesting is the 5 strategic assessments. So that's their assessment at the planning partnership level. But there's a really good graphic on page 80 of the annual audit report. That is also focused on whether the partnership is doing the right things in the right way, and is focused on those service outcomes such as life expectancy, employment rate, and income deprivation. And the latest data trends there show that the gap between the most and the least deprived areas reveal a worsening picture for almost all outcomes. So I think my assessment chimes, I think, with yours, that this is a mixed picture. I think, as the auditors have highlighted, though, the council have really strengthened their approach to performance reporting. I do think, though, that the next step is now how they are using that reporting to drive the improvements. I think, crucially, what will be really important as the council are developing their change plans, their service plans, which are, as I've said already, due this spring, understanding the impact that those service and change plans are expected to have on outcomes going forward as well feels like it's going to be a really important part of the picture. As I say, at the moment, it feels like that's the next step for the council in terms of really understanding and delving underneath that. But Karen, I don't know if you've got anything further that you'd want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you. I think as you made reference to, we were reporting in 22-23 actually, and I think we did report in 22-23 that we couldn't actually report on the council's performance due to the timing of the performance information, and we did make some quite challenging recommendations to the council to improve their performance management and performance reporting. And I suppose it's reflecting that actually our reporting was around about November time. So November 2023, the council adopted and embraced those recommendations and worked quite hard to develop and take forward those recommendations. They have implemented new processes in terms of looking at their performance management framework and what those reports look like. For us, it is now, and we comment on that in the report, and the council do acknowledge it as well, it's how they use that information and that performance information, because that for us is where that gap is. And also, as Helena has said, it's integral to the change planning and the work that they're doing around about that as well. It's almost following that golden thread to utilising that performance information to drive forward improvement.
Thank you. So probably too early to say. I think just in terms of some of the other local authorities that we've looked at, they've maybe been a bit more developed in terms of those planning elements of how they're going to tackle performance areas that are perhaps falling. And obviously we are seeing that widening gap right across Scotland in terms of between the least and most deprived areas. But yeah, it was just an area that looked, I couldn't quite tell if there was progress being made there, but it does sound like it's maybe too early to say yet for Fife.
I think so. I mean, as I said in my Controller of Audit report, I think the council's sense is that the trends that they have seen are in line with national trends and increased pressure and demand across the sector as well. And I think that is shown in their performance in the LGBF family groups as well, that they are broadly in line, I think. But as I say, I think the crucial thing now feels about how, as Karen has articulated, that golden thread, how they are drawing those links between their change plans and their performance going forward feels an important area of future focus.
Angela?
Thank you, Chair. Just following on in that vein, I'm just wondering if you could comment a bit on the culture of performance management rather than reporting within the council. I mean, they've been in a relatively comfortable financial position relative to other local authorities. So I'm really wondering about that being said, and I know that the stats are difficult to interpret, they're very variable, but how has that been taken forward within the council from what the auditors yourself have seen, Helena? And in particular, how are they addressing and aligning funding to the 3 priorities that they've set out in the plan for Fife? I've got another question, Jo, if that's okay after this one.
Thanks. And I think I'll pass over to Karen, because I think, as she's already highlighted, this is an area where I think they've seen real improvements based on their audit recommendations. So I'll bring Karen in to talk a little bit more how the performance management works in practice.
Thank you. So as you've mentioned, Plan for Fife is it's a partnership document, but it's also Fife Council's, I'm going to call it their corporate plan as well, and that identifies the priorities and themes. It also includes ambitions, and part of the performance management framework is reporting on the ambitions and progress against the ambitions. The council has, as I've mentioned, worked quite hard in terms of developing their performance management framework, and that goes down to the service level, where they have developed new reports, performance reports, and they started to be issued towards the end of 2024. So again, it's too early for us or the council to even see the impact of the change in reporting that they are doing, but from our discussions and observations, picking up on your culture point, we do think that the council and the services are embracing that change and moving forward with that new style of performance reporting. So I think, again, it is too early to say. In terms of the development, they're developing the change plans, but they also the services do have annual service plans as well, which provide that link between actually what are the priorities and ambitions for the council, and how that links into the resources and how the services are delivering to ensure that they are meeting the strategic objectives and ambitions of the council.
Okay, thank you for that. I suppose just a comment before my other question, Chair, is I'm surprised that they're so late in the day in developing performance processes that are meaningful. From what you're saying, Karen, the local government benchmarking framework has been around for almost 2 decades now, so this isn't something new for local government. So I'm interested that that's not been a priority for them up until now. But that aside, the other question is really about they're in a unique position in terms of growth deals. So they're part of the Tayside growth deal and the Edinburgh East of Scotland City region growth deal. Received significant amount of money for some sizable projects. So I've wondered about performance then in relation, one, to economic development. I see in the chart that Helena's referred to, there is an increase in employability, but I'm just wondering, how is that employment, how is that translating into employability and poverty, other aspects of poverty? And do they have sufficient measures to be able to see how that money is making a difference in local communities?
Thanks, Angela. I'm not sure that we'll know the specifics of the impact of the growth deal, but I think I'll bring in Karen in a moment to see if she's got more to add. I think as you've highlighted, that the area in the family group comparative performance of the LGBF that would be most relevant is obviously the environmental, culture, economic development grouping, and in
Brennan. I think we'll have to move on and get Helena's response when she. Oh, you're back there, Helena. Nope. Nope. Karen, can you pick up?
Of course I can. Just reflecting on the comment made about local government benchmarking framework and the information. It's not to say that the council did not have a performance framework and weren't reporting performance before. It's just that they've reviewed that, enhanced it, and I think that the changes that they have made, including timing, setting targets, and thinking about the impact and how they can usefully use that performance information is where they are now going in terms of that direction of travel. I think Helena's maybe come back. Do you want to come in, Helena, before I?
You can tell us about the impact of the city deals. I think was the
Yeah. Unfortunately, that has not been part of the scope of our audit work to date in terms of the impact of the deal. We did pick up on it as part of the thematic review, as the council offered it as an evidence of good practice, but we haven't actually audited in any way. The council does have, as part of its change process, there are corporate themes that it has identified, and they cover what they call no wrong door, which is making them be more less reactive, but more proactive in terms of dealing with the challenges facing the council. But it also includes digital and place, and place is predominantly around about the environmental and the economic areas of the council. So as those change plans develop and the performance reporting is integrated into those change plans, I would anticipate that actually the impact of such areas will be more visible.
Can I see a hand up from Mike or Ruth? Is there anything that we've missed in anything you wanted to pick up before I move on to transformation?
I think that was fine, thanks.
My only question was really around the best value numbers, the best value table.
Yeah.
Which just to understand what role that plays, because in a sense you could get everything right on that. It could all be green without things actually getting any better. And so where do you see the focus of the performance framework being, on outcomes or on the best value stuff?
I think I'm back. So I'll kick off and pass to Karen. I mean, I think so. They are measured. So the strategic assessment, the LGBF, and the best value framework, they are, as you've highlighted, measuring different things. The strategic assessment focused very much on those outcomes, and the best value assessment very much focused on best value, which you know, I think I've described at various points with the Commission is sort of those foundations, those building blocks on which, you know, strong outcomes and performance can also be developed. But they are different things, but I think together help create an important picture, actually. So I think seeing the best value assessment is helpful to see, but I think, as you've highlighted, it's important to recognise that they are two different things.
I could probably add to that as well. They are definitely two different things. This was 23-24 was the first year that the council prepared such a report, and it was predominantly on the back of our discussions and recommendations from 22-23, where we were looking at the SPI direction, and in particular SPI number 2, in terms of how the council can demonstrate that it's delivering best value, taking the best value themes and in effect self-assessing itself against those best value themes. And that output is as a result of those discussions and how the council is looking to demonstrate it is achieving best value across the different themes. So that's just a wee bit of context around about the best value report. The strategic assessment that Helena mentioned as well, that was that's a report that the partnership commission once every 3 years, and that is to inform the future development of the partnership plan for Fife. So they use that information for the purposes of developing the plan for Fife, whereas the local government benchmarking framework performance information is specific to the council, and it's how they utilise that information at a council level to drive forward improvement.
And just, I suppose, one final thing I'd say on the best value indicators, which personally I welcome, partly again because quite often when we've talked about best value in the past and pace of improvement, we've focused on sort of delivering actions, and I think what this shows is it's also just looking at actually are those actions around continuous improvement delivering the outcomes around things like financial managing asset as well. So I think it's a helpful piece of self-reflection.
Okay, thanks. Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a little bit more around performance in the context of Fife's communities. And I guess the report does give us some inclination that Fife has adopted an embedded approach to community engagement and involvement, which sounds really good. But I did wonder whether Helena or Karen might have some more information around, in practice, how is that working? I did have a wee nosy at the website, and I was particularly struck by the information on community asset transfers, which they do seem to have done relatively well on in comparison to some other authorities. But it is notable that the majority of those that have gone through are in the more affluent areas of Fife Council, and there's very little movement on that in some of the other areas. So yeah, I just wondered if they've got any additional information on how successfully Fife is performing with engaging their communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola, and I'll bring Karen in a moment. But I think particularly on community asset transfers, I think they have quite a robust and well-established framework in place where 12 assets to date have been transferred. But I think they have recognised that further work is required to encourage and support community groups to manage and own assets. And I think they are currently developing a revised approach to community engagement, which involves integrating community asset transfers into that process. I think more generally on community engagement, and Karen will want to say more about this, I think auditors have found that the council has robust plans in place, and I think the leadership thematic offers a few good examples around a people's panel, community engagement toolkit, and digital tools to support hybrid and online consultation. I think the only thing I would add before bringing Karen in, and I made it in earlier on in the conversation, is that for me there's now something about how the community are engaged in those difficult decisions around the medium-term financial strategy and the change plans going forward. And I think that's something that I'd be encouraging the council to think about very much going forward. But Karen, do you want to come in and say any more?
Yeah, so I would echo everything Helena said. I think from our perspective in terms of our audit work to date, and particularly around about the community asset transfers, our focus has been more understanding what the processes and arrangements that they have had in place, and not taking it further in terms of thinking about it and the impact, or actually whether or not they are reaching out to the wider population of Fife. Fife Council have developed an area committee structure as well. So community engagement and community involvement is at the heart of what they do, delivering through those area committees. And as Helena said, in our thematic review in 22-23, we tried to bring out some examples of community engagement that they have been delivering.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I again need to move on, but don't want to cut off if there's anything particular anybody else wants to pick up. Performance numbers, I think we've gone through them fairly closely. Can therefore turn to, I think, becoming increasingly important, the transformation aspects of the audit. I'm going to start off with Carol to open this up on transformation.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so there's some really good areas of practice in the report, like strong leadership and so on. But what struck me as being really missing was the element of innovation and transformation to improve efficiency, and a stronger focus on the outcomes to drive transformation. So really it's what your sense of Fife's ability to actually make these efficiency savings, improve their innovation and drive transformation, because they've not had to in the past, and we've talked about that earlier. Do you think they have the culture, the skills and the tools to actually step up to the plate and make those transformations that they really need, and to drive that outcomes focus also going forward?
Thanks, Carol. And I'll bring Karen in to talk and more specifically, I suppose, about what she's observed, I think, around the council would be really helpful in terms of that drive. But a couple of things that I would also highlight. One, I think, as I've said already, that this does feel like a crucial tipping point for the council in terms of the need to make those savings and transform, and that this isn't something that the council has had to do before. As I've outlined already, they are in the process of developing those directorate and service visions and having change plans by March 2025. And I think that will be a key point in terms of providing that sort of, I suppose, that evidence. So arguably it's you know, a bit too early, but I think the transformation theme around the future best value transformation theme, I think, will come at a really important point for us and auditors to look at these. I think in terms of that leadership and that cultural aspect, I'll bring Karen in, but would note that the council has committed within its annual governance statement to further develop the leadership skills and capacity of officers during 2024-25 to ensure that they've got that leadership to effectively respond to the changing demands and risks. So I think it is something that they have recognised. They also had a number of leadership summits in 22 2022 focused around delivering the plan for Fife, and those were attended by 100 leaders from across the council and the wider partnership. Really, I suppose, getting that collaborative leadership focus as well. So I think there are signs, absolutely, but obviously this is going to be a crucial year, I think, for the council. But Karen, is there anything further that you can add around what you've seen in terms of that drive?
Yeah, and I would echo what Helena's saying in terms of it's almost a pivotal point for them. Going back to 2023, and in part it was the reason why we did not carry out our thematic review earlier in the year, was they had a change in chief executive, and we wanted to give the opportunity for the new chief executive to come in, understand what his direction was going to be, and at that point in time we also commented that we couldn't comment on the pace and direction of and improvement on at that point in time. What we have seen since the new chief exec came in, and as Helena's mentioned as well, there were other senior changes to the council executive team as well, is that they are all working closely together to drive forward this change planning process. They do have governance arrangements in place to enable that to happen, and our experience and observation of both the council executive team, but our engagement with members, because it's not just the finance team that we're dealing with, that everyone is in effect bought into this process that they're embarking on, and the move to adopting these change plans.
Thank you. Okay, following up with that, is there anything you would like to pick up on, Andrew?
Well, thanks, George. Maybe thanks, Helena and Karen, for the report. If I could maybe just focus on the section in your covering report, Helena, on leadership. I was interested, there's a particular approach around member development, which appears to include mandatory training. And I just wondered if you could say a bit more, and you comment in the covering report that's had a degree of success, but I would be interested to know if there's any further evidence at this stage as to how well that's been received, and was there a spike of interest in the early days of that mandatory sort of approach, and has it continued? Because it is an unusual, I think you mentioned in the covering report, that goes beyond what's legislatively required. I'd just be interested if that level of initial uptake has been maintained, because it is a novel approach, which I think if it's been successful, the council should be commended for.
Thanks, Andrew. So I think in the leadership thematic, we highlight that members were surveyed about their training needs, and almost 80% felt that they were satisfied with the training sessions that they delivered to date. I'm obviously not quite sure of the particular point of time in that, and Karen might want to come in, but I think that that is a positive indication. I do know as well that the programme for training was due to be considered by group leaders and rolled out in 23-24. So I think that that's obviously something that the audit team will want to come back to as part of the 24-25 audit. So they may have more to add then, but I'll just double check with Karen whether she's got anything else to add at this point.
That's correct, Helena. So we consider elected member training actually every year. It's not something that we risk assess. One of the other initiatives that they took to developing their member training was actually having the members actively involved in developing that training programme, so that they have the buy-in as well. So as I say, we do consider this on an annual basis. So anything that comes out, we will tease out in our future reports.
Thanks very much, Karen, Helena, that's helpful.
Thank you. Can I perhaps pick up on that then? So we've got a council that's, I'm going to use the phrase, and you can tell me if I'm absolutely wrong, that's slow to the mark on transformation, and a leadership team that's now learning the reality, which is this pace of change needs to be picked up. Is that fair? Are we seeing the pace of change picking up? Are we seeing a leadership team who are accepting the level of transformation that's going to be required? Are we seeing metrics being put in place to drive that pace?
Karen, shall I pass to you, because I think that's
Yeah, I think it's an interesting observation to make, and for us as auditors, the key point for us will be whether or not actually they do stick to those timescales that they have set out and deliver the change plans by March 2025, and then actively use them, embrace them, and they see the desired impact, which goes back to the performance reporting as well. So I think at the moment it's too early to
Less than a month,
say.
month away from
Exactly.
that target.
Yes.
So you must have a clarity around the likelihood of delivering them to that timescale, or
So
not.
We've had no indication or no notification to say that they are not on track to deliver by March.
Angela.
So just very briefly, I'm right in saying though, Karen, that while there might have been a change in the roles, the people that were appointed weren't new to, some weren't new to Fife and some certainly were not new to local government. Is that correct?
That's correct. The new chief exec was one of the former executive directors at the council. They have had changes in the executive team where there has been external appointments, in particular around about education.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mike, did you want to pick up anything on digital?
I think it's probably relates as much to the stuff, but it was really the report suggests that the arrangements are in place to achieve digital, but then raises questions both about the leadership and about the capacity/capability. To me, raises questions about the overall judgment about the arrangements being in place. So I suppose, and I see things are happening, action is being taken, but I just like to understand a bit more the actions being put in place are actually going to get them to the right place on digital. And as a small adjunct, are there, how far are they getting support either from other local authorities or from the digital office in relation to their these challenges?
Thanks, Mike. I will bring in Karen to talk about some of the specifics of that, but I think just a couple of points to highlight. One, in terms of arrangements being in place, I'd highlight that there's the council has a digital portfolio board which has responsibility for the leadership, direction and advocacy, I suppose, of the digital strategy. I think, as you've highlighted, the reports have also flagged challenges around capacity and engagement with the digital, and I suppose a question around confidence. And again, I'd highlight that in 2022, a digital skills learning team was established, which has focused on increasing digital skills and confidence. And I think there are a couple of good examples within the thematic. But as the report highlights, the council has recognised that this is an area where capacity to engage with and support digital trials has still remained a challenge. But Karen, do you want to provide a bit more context to that?
Of course. So, as I mentioned previously, the council has, as part of its change planning process, it's identified 3 corporate priorities, one of them being no wrong door, the other one being place, but the third one's digital. So it is forefront of the council's direction of travel objectives, and as Helena said, they have put governance processes in place to support and move that forward. The challenges when we were carrying out the thematic review, we were having interviews and discussions with council team members, and in particular around about that digital aspect. And it's the challenge facing the council is it's a big council, and it's how you bring on board and go forward with a council of that size, and the individual teams, and the individual teams have differing needs and priorities as well. So it's how you take that corporate direction and roll it out and have individual teams embrace the direction of travel that you're going on. Your question over whether or not they're engaging with other councils or the digital office, we did not pick that up as part of our review and the considerations at this moment in time.
Okay, thank you. That takes us through then to workforce. Can I ask Jennifer to lead off on workforce?
Thanks, Chair. I've got a sort of two-part question, I suppose, on the workforce element, and the BV thematic report was really helpful, and I was really encouraged to see some of the innovation they're actually adopting in terms of future skills development. So the first part of the question I'd like to explore is, how are they really tracking which of those innovative workforce skills development activities are really delivering results? Because they've got quite a number of different things going on, and I'm interested to understand if through your audit work you can see how are they deciding which ones are really going to deliver that they might want to double down on in the future. And just to get the second part of the question in, I'm interested in how much they're sharing that practice of what they're doing in that innovative space with other councils, because I think we've looked at quite a number of other reports where we've perhaps felt there could be more innovation in the skills development, and seeing a report where it appears to be happening, I'd be keen to understand if we know how their learning from this is being shared as potential good practice. So thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Just on that last point, I'm not sure that it was a particular focus of the audit work as to how the council is sharing its learning. Whether that's not to say that it's not happening, but I'm just not sure that we've got the evidence to offer a view either way on that. Just on the tracking of benefits of the initiatives, the council does have a process in place for monitoring its implementation of its workforce strategy, and as part of that has a number of success measures that it does report progress on. However, I think that, and I'll bring in Karen to see if she's got any more detail to add on this, I think the latest progress report was delayed from September 23 to December 24. So I think it's that, I suppose my starting point would be, I think the mechanisms are there, but in the absence of regular performance monitoring, it's difficult to track those benefits. But I'll bring in Karen to see if she's got any further updates on that.
Yeah, that's correct, Helena. I suppose it comes back to one of the themes that we've referred to before. There was a delay in the reporting of the performance around about that, and it was delayed to September 2024, which was after we had concluded our review. So we raised a recommendation that they actually need to improve the timeliness of the performance reporting in this area.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. I wonder if I could follow up then, having sort of reflected on the good practice. I'm interested in exploring a little bit more about how the council is sort of doing its blended working and hybrid working and things like that, because I picked up a sense from the report that they've done quite an interesting job of categorising job roles and looking at where they could be done. But again, I think I'm interested in understanding whether the council's getting there in being really clear on the levels of productivity it expects from those different roles done in different places. And again, it speaks, I suppose, to that wider question we have been discussing about kind of managing performance and making sure that everyone contributing in the council understands what's expected of them and what level they need to deliver to. And I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that.
Sorry, thank you. Absolutely to agree, I suppose, with the your starting point that the council has recognised that only 13% of the workforce are eligible to opt in at this point to blended working, and has committed to consider the different degrees of flexibility for different what they've called workforce style groups, and as you say, they've identified 6 different groups, and I think they are working with an external organisation to explore the impact of current working patterns and potential opportunities for flexible working, and are piloting. I think they piloted an approach with adult services and are now thinking about how similar exercises can be rolled out. In terms of that specifics about productivity, as we know, actually, you know, productivity is a difficult thing to measure, but I believe the council's HR team is exploring productivity measures for each of those 6 identified work styles, and they've set out productivity principles have been drafted, but the council, I think, recognises that further work is required around these. So I think they are definitely thinking around it, and as you said, it's an interesting approach that one I think we'll want to keep an eye on going forward. Karen, I don't know if I've missed anything there that you'd want to flag.
No, when we carried out this review, I think on reflection that was an important message that we wanted to get across in the review, that actually there was only a small proportion or percentage that could easily adopt hybrid or flexible working because of the staff profile and the different services that the council provides. But it was also reflected in the fact that actually the council has recognised that, and it is actively exploring how it can offer flexible and hybrid working to those other groups of staff across the council. I just thought we found it very interesting, and it was an important message that we wanted to get out in the thematic report.
Yeah, and I think it, just to finish off, I mean, it's good that they're doing that, because I think increasingly we see evidence that what employees want is flexibility in how they do their jobs, and I guess it's a key retention tool for any employer to be able to offer that flexibility where they can. So good that the council's looking at it. That's me, Chair, on workforce questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. It takes me to almost a supplementary on leadership. Sorry, Carol, you wanted to pick up something on workforce?
Yeah, just on workforce, a couple of small questions. I wondered about, there's some really good stuff in there about their apprenticeships and their Grow Their Own, which is actually quite exemplar in its field. So it's whether they're sharing those learnings with other councils is my first one. And the second one is on their performance metrics table, one of the things that was missing was any metrics around employee engagement, and if they were actually doing proper employee engagement, just with that not being one of the metrics. So that was just the 2 points.
Thank you.
Thanks. So on that sharing best practice with others, as I said before, I'm not sure that that's something that we particularly looked at. So not that I don't know that it's not happening, but it's not something that I can really comment on. In terms of employee engagement, yes, they do run an employee engagement survey. I think they ran one in 2021 and again in spring 2024. And I think they have another survey planned for 2026, so on a fairly regular cycle. I think response rates are relatively low. So in 2024, the response rate was 38%, but that is up from 26% in 2021. But I think the council is definitely looking at how it can improve response rates, and we know that it's not alone in that challenge. And I think overall there has been an increase in positive responses to the statements that are contained within the survey, which focus on questions around self-leadership, team leadership, community leadership, and organisational leadership. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Well, then takes us, I think, Malcolm, you wanted to pick up on the kind of political leadership and the cabinet structure.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And it's kind of building on the answer to the previous question that Andrew asked on member training. But this is a large council, probably one of the largest in terms of councillors in the country. A minority administration, which I guess produces particular challenges. But I was looking at, I mean, the cabinet appears to be quite large. At 21 members, it appears to be proportionately quite large. So there's a question for me there about what does the auditor, what's the controller feel about the agility of the cabinet to deal with the challenges that we know are ahead. And then the other side of the same coin really is there's still a large number of members who are not involved in the cabinet and, if you like, the frontline decision making. So I'm just interested to get an impression as to how well engaged they are. So there's a couple of points in there, but I'd just be interested in the views. Thanks.
Thanks, Malcolm, and I'll bring Karen in to share her observations of what she's observed. But in addition to the cabinet, I suppose I'd highlight that there are other mechanisms for engagement. So there are cross-party working groups that have been established to explore issues and strategic policy areas. And there are various structures that promote collaborative working between councillors and officers. And finally, that political leaders meet regularly as a cross-party leadership group to discuss items of interest. So I think, you know, the cabinet is one mechanism, but there are clearly other mechanisms in place as well to support that engagement and discussion. But Karen, I'll bring you in to share some observations.
I think from our perspective and our observation and working with the council for the last couple of years, they do work well together. And when I say work well together, the councillors work well together, and it doesn't seem like they have experienced difficult challenges and difficult decisions to date, especially around about the financial position, which may pose a different response to that question depending on how they go. But to date they all seem to be operating well, and there is also that good working relationship between the elected members and the senior management team as well.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. I mean, I guess you've made the point is that they're working well just now, but when the difficult decisions come, it'll be interesting to see if that continues. But thanks for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm. And now chance to kind of the last area, those are watching, very interested to know that we're covering off a couple of items that Andy's going to lead on.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to start with an observation, I suppose, just reflecting on members' comments that page 51 of very helpful report. It's always good to read reports on the Kingdom of Fife. Significant work on change proposals are due in the latter half of 24. And then page 70, not just agreed, but settled change plans will be delivered by March 25. Both of them handily after the audit period. So obviously you can't observe them, but we will be noting with interest the next annual report around those two promises that are there. My two questions are basically risk-based. One's in the wider scope report around workforce. So thank you for the 3 reports, not just the one. And that's in relation to digital. Page 15 of that wider report, when we're talking about a very positive picture about digital progress. And one of the schemes that's mentioned, I don't know how you pronounce it, but UYOD, use your own device. And it's mentioning resilience there. My concern there is about the level of encryption in a world of cybercrime, where we've seen Western Isles have significant strategic issues over a cyber attack, whether from a state actor or a non-state actor is irrelevant, I suppose, on the impact. How happy are you that audit and risk in the council are picking up that whole cybercrime threat while still trying to be innovative? That's the first question. And if I may be permitted a second one, Chair, that's around the risk around fraud within a huge budget. As you'll be well aware, Karen, that we've had a 102 report around Aberdeen City. In fact, I was there meeting with the Chief Executive Council with the Vice Chair this week. And one of the things in discussion with them and from the report was the whole issue around it's not just enough to have controls, they actually have to be exercised. There has to be a segregation of duties, not just in policy, but in practice. And the other thing that was brought up was around the really helpful discussion between external audit, whether ASITS or Audit Scotland, and internal audit in scoping out what are the risks we're trying to mitigate through audit. Is there discussions around sampling size, for instance, around different processes and procedures on a rolling basis? So could you give us a bit of insight around that interaction that you've had as an external auditor with internal audit in that risk mitigation environment? Hopefully those 2 questions make sense.
Thank you, Andy.
Of course, Helena, I'm assuming you're handing over.
Yes, I'm gonna pass to Karen just to talk about the ASIT's approach to auditing both fraud and cyber risk.
Yeah, so I'll start with the cyber risk question, and our approach to considering cyber risks actually falls predominantly within our audit of the financial statements. So we have a requirement under the ISAs, the International Standards in Auditing, to consider internal IT general controls, but equally actually cyber as well. And we as an organisation have specialists that deal with both IT, understanding IT general controls, but also that cyber element as well. So we use specialists within our team to consider that, and if we identify any specific weaknesses in those processes or controls, we flag them up to management predominantly, depending on the nature and the sensitivity of those recommendations. We wouldn't necessarily put them in our annual audit reports because they're public documents. So we are having that ongoing engagement with management if we are identifying anything that is critical to addressing any weaknesses in that area. In terms of fraud, again, actually our approach is tied in with our wider scope responsibilities, but equally we have to consider fraud in the audit of the financial statements. And one of the procedures that we carry out as a team is we actually take the Audit Scotland technical bulletins, which identify any frauds that have happened over the quarter, and we take those and pose those questions to the council. What arrangements and controls do you have in place to ensure that such a fraud could not arise at the council, and then consider what their responses are. we do also work alongside internal audit. Our view is that actually the council should be viewing the audit resource as a combined resource, and we shouldn't be duplicating any effort. So we do continually engage with Fife Council's internal auditors to understand actually what work they're doing in that area as well. For Fife Council, it is slightly different because the fraud remit and the risk remit sit under the internal audit function currently as we speak as well. So while they are completely separate. So we do, as I say, have that continuous engagement to make sure that actually we're combining that audit resource and considering the findings of internal audit in that space as well.
Thank you, very helpful.
I think we've probably run out of questions on this at this stage. And just to say, those watching, we will now consider in private our views of what we're now going to do with this report. But thank you for those who've been involved to date. And I think we're going to have a 5-minute break. So do we leave and come back in?
Leave with that, but we'll mute it.
Okay, so it stay in, but it will be muted. But 5-minute break. So back at 11:45. Good. Haven't got everybody back. Nope. Who we're missing? Missing Christine. Nicola. They're full house. I can't work it out. I think they are. No, Ruth's not back.
Ruth and Christine. See you too.
There's no decision making to be made, so we can move on to, I think. So move to item 6 then, which is the local government policy update report. Hand over to Joe, another good report, Joe. So is there anything particularly you want to flag up for us?
Thanks very much, Chair. Nothing really to highlight from this report. It's obviously been a fairly short period since the previous one. There has been a fair amount of very recent activities. You'll see a couple of reports there, which obviously came out since this report was produced, the financial bulletin and the sustainable transport report. We've also had the best value in East Renfrewshire report published today. So we'll round up all of the activity around that in next month's report. Joe and Derek, along with Blythe and Martin from Audit Scotland, were at the local government committee on Tuesday this week, and the official report, so the sort of transcript from that meeting has just been published. So I'll share that with members later today, together with a summary of the session that we had initially from our monitoring service as well. And we have also the public audit committee session later this month on the sustainable transport report. So some more to come on that as well. But yeah, nothing really to highlight. A couple of updates on consultations there. Nothing further to add to that. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Open to questions then for Joe. Mike.
Thanks. As you said, Joe, it's maybe even a fuller report than usual of stuff going on. Not all of it necessarily welcome. Two questions on it really. Just one was on the National Care Service, where there's the Scottish Government are looking at ways to enhance integration governance. If there's anything more you can say about the scope of that bit of work. And the second was around on homelessness, the housing regulator having indicated that as it were, the current issues were beyond their powers and it was a systemic issue. Anything there in relation to the system in question and the sort of overarching local government dimension to that?
Thanks, Mike. On the National Care Service, I haven't seen anything in more detail in terms of work that can be done sort of in lieu of the legislative sort of structural reform that has now been kind of pulled back from by the Scottish Government. But we'll keep an eye out for that. And I know that Audit Scotland colleagues will be doing likewise. On the Scottish Housing Regulator issue, I think really the message there was the regulator was sort of saying it was an issue that went beyond what their normal business is, which is they're dealing with individual councils, and that actually the causes of the issues they were seeing required a national level policy response. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on what they feel is the particular government or accounts commission aspect to that, but it was really kind of just a bit of a statement, a bit of a message, I think.
Any follow-up, Mike? No.
I mean, I just I think it would be quite helpful to make, you know, as more comes into the public domain around both points to maybe continue to cover those issues.
Thank you. Carol?
Yeah, it was just on good report, Joe. Thank you. It was on paragraph 20 about the hotspots for councillor complaints, and just to get a sense of the sort of prevalence and a bit more on that, if you knew kind of if there was any trends in the councils that were having these complaints or anything.
We do include the data from the Ethical Standards Commissioner into the intelligence report, which we do every 6 months. Usually with that, our kind of message is that's shared with members and was just before Christmas, the most recent version. Usually what we say with that is it's difficult to really draw any firm conclusions on where there are, particular issues that the Commission need to be particularly aware of, but it's one aspect that feeds into our kind of broader audit intelligence gathering. So I'm not sure if there's any more information available on what the Commissioner or the Ethical Standards Commissioner was referring to, any particular areas he was referring to. I think it's certainly what I've picked up is that it's a general theme that he, in the sort of first couple of years that he's been in Commissioner, has picked up on. And the Improvement Service have picked up on that as well, something that they want to try and help with and support. But I'm not aware of any kind of further information to any particular councils or areas that are having particular challenges that we need to be aware of at this point. But we'll see that continue to pull through in the statistics that we share every 6 months on the cases that the Ethical Standards Commissioner is seeing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Joe? Good. That takes us then to item 7, which is Chair's updates. You have a one page of the things I've been doing in since the last board, last commission meeting. I want to pick up 2 or 3 things from that. Clearly, I was at Audit Scotland board as a board member, and just to let you know that there's a new non-exec member called Patrick Bart that's joined. A new board apprentice. It seems odd to call somebody board apprentice because she's a consultant in not E&E but in emergency medicine and I think it's Monklands. So 2 new members and 2 new insights into the whole role of Audit Scotland. So it was an interesting first meeting. I attended the causeless special interest group on the 30th of the month with Sarah, and that was equally interesting to hear views of council leaders on their thoughts on what Accounts Commission are saying and doing. And then, as Joe mentioned, Derek and I joined the, so I should have said that Andrew accompanied me, and I'm going to come back to that because Andrew had been there and Derek being at the local government committee, their background and their experience and their abilities to talk the language of the people at the other side of the table adds to our credibility. So thanks Andrew and Derek for their contributions on both those items. And I think Andrew, your trip to the north with Andy was an interesting experience, and you took it on board.
Yeah, no, it was all absolutely fine. Andy, we want to come in on it as well, but it was all absolutely fine. There was very positive response from officers. There was a sort of more mixed response from elected members, but it was mostly positive and pushback against the findings.
And then tomorrow, Blythe and I will be meeting up with the Directors of Finance. Again, part of the kind of starting our stakeholder engagement and understanding their perceptions of what we're doing. So I'll be interested to see how they take on board our request for the SPI data and our budget data requests, and the extent to which they feel either it's a burden too much or they're happy for us to be getting it so that we can then be arguing to some extent some of their case for them. So an interesting, I wouldn't say a month, an interesting 3 weeks, and more to come. Happy to take any questions on any other item that's on that list. Christine.
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned your meeting to find out what people thought of the Accounts Commission. Are you going to kind of share what they thought? Just to,
yes, I mean it's positive.
that's good.
We can go further, so I think there's opportunities. When we dare I say at the strategy session, I can certainly think about how we could feed in some of that into that discussion. Nicola, did you have your hand up and taken it down, or?
Yes, I did, because Christine just asked you exactly what I was going to ask.
That's fine. Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions on Chair's update report? So that takes us to Item 8, the Scottish budget briefing. And I think again, that's to Alison and the team. Thank you.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm joined today by Richard and Tom from our public finances team. And this is really an opportunity for the Commission to reflect on the implications of the Scottish budget with a particular focus on local governments. You received the bulk of this written briefing a few weeks ago. There's obviously been some updates since then. The budget remains a moving picture. We saw the stage 1 budget bill rabbit come out of the hat this week in the form of some further funding for local government for national insurance increases, not the full cost, and Richard will say a little bit more on the headlines on the numbers. A couple of more high-level points that I wanted to make before passing over to Richard and Tom on the detail was, first of all, to assure you that I know you don't see Richard and Tom at Commission meetings so often, but just to absolutely assure you that they've been working very closely with Blythe and Martin and Lucy and the team working on the local government overview and the team moving on to the budget bulletin. So it's fundamentally one and the same analysis, and we make use of common analytical tools there. And the analysis you see today will come through in the local government budget bulletin that's coming later in the spring. Also very keen through the discussion as well as reflecting on the budget itself, to get your feedback on how the Commission wishes to engage on the Scottish budget, if this format works for you, or if you'd be looking for us to develop something different for future budget years. But I will pass over now to Richard and Tom, who are the experts, and I have conducted the briefing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Alison. I always worry a little bit when I get called expert, but I suppose if the cap fits. So thank you very much for having us along today to talk about the budget. So as Alison said, I might just highlight a couple of things, in particular sort of the recent developments and how that affects what's written in the paper. Very briefly on the context background front, we know that the UK government budget back in October resulted in more Barnett consequentials coming to the Scottish government than was expected. That resulted in around a 3.8 real terms percentage increase to the overall Scottish government budget. And as we highlight in the context bit, because there's a few moving parts around that with forecasts of social security and the forecasts of relative tax takes, what is actually available for other parts of the budget is less than that, probably more like 0.8% real terms. A couple of points to mention. So firstly, earlier this week, the Scottish Government will do updates, revisions, they call them, on their budget during the year. They do one in the autumn and they do one in the spring. And the spring budget revision has come out slightly earlier than we would expect. We're nearly at spring, but not quite. And what that gives us a little bit more information about what's happened with the 1.5 billion that was announced, that was relative to this current financial year. One of the things that's happened is that the Scottish Government have decided, and you may have seen this in the press, not to use ScotWind funds for some of their spending this year. Another thing that's happened is that they were planning to borrow some money to account for what's called forecasting error, which is how they manage the difference between what they expect to get from taxes and what they actually do get from taxes. They don't need to use that borrowing anymore. Why does that matter? It frees up some additional funding because you've got reduced debt servicing costs. And some of that money has been used to support some of these additional announcements that have been more recently made. They come to around, I think, £16.7 million. You may have seen some of them on the news around establishing a £2 bus fare cap in certain regional areas, extending some free meal eligibility in other areas. So just to let you know the link between what's happening at the national picture in the spring budget revisions and how that can sometimes transfer across to what's available for spending in local government. The other thing to raise, which has obviously been a big news item of late, is the national insurance contributions and the impact of changing the contribution rates of employers around that. So, earlier on in the week, the UK government released their local government financial settlement, and that included some money extra for councils to account for their national insurance costs. Because that's related to a devolved area, the Scottish Government will also see a share of that money, so there will be money coming through to the Scottish Government because of this additional money that's gone to English councils to account for the national insurance coverage. That's unlikely to cover the entire amount that the Cabinet Secretary announced in Parliament earlier this week is available. As you may have seen, she has announced that £144 million will be added to council budgets. What we're not sure yet is how that will be distributed around the councils, and it may not be sufficient to match the full costs of delivering services with staff. There'll be two elements to that. One will be the actual on-payroll stuff, and the other one will be the if services are outsourced, then obviously the people you are outsourcing those services to have costs and staff costs, and how that relates through to the charges for those services. So just a couple of things to pick up on, just the headline messages obviously from the paper itself. We can see an increase coming through, a real terms increase into the local government budget that's available, and that includes both a revenue and a capital increase. One of the things that we've pointed out in terms of the capital is that obviously that's quite a large increase based on last year of about 19%, but also just letting you know that in terms of looking at a longer trend, it's still less than what we would have seen 2 years ago. So to manage expectations around what councils are planning to do with that increase and how they're planning to spend that capital, as well as the revenue. We've also seen a continuation of the move towards more general revenue grant and less of the specified, although both have raised the majority of the increases coming through the general revenue grant. And we've set out some more information about that in the paper. The last bit of the paper that we do is we just take some of the particular areas we know you're interested in from a work programme point of view and set into context what the budget is saying around those particular areas, which we hope is useful, and we'll make sure that that information is also understood by audit teams throughout Audit Scotland. So those are the main things to highlight. Again, as Alison said, a moving picture. We're expecting the stages 2 and 3 to take place over the course of this month in readiness for the next financial year. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you for all the questions. I just want to say the Commission have asked for a briefing like this as soon as possible, and you have responded fantastically. So thank you for that. I've got 3 questions of Christine, Derek, and then Andrew. And then Malcolm.
Thanks very much. A great report. Thanks very much, Richard. Can I just ask, Appendix A, when it says changes to presentation of the Scottish budget, will we be able to deal with that going forward to make comparisons? Sorry about the noise in the background. That's the dog walker arriving.
I'm sorry, would you be able to repeat the last bit of the question? I'm sorry, Christine.
Yeah, it's the changes in presentation of the Scottish budget. If it's being changed, do you know why it's been changed would be my first question. And will it be possible for us to draw comparisons from the way that we've looked at it in the past going forward?
So why and then comparisons. So on the why point, in a nutshell, this is to deal with to give a better take of your budget against the prior year's spending. So what has sometimes been said by local government authorities, but also all types of public sector bodies, is they'll have a budget set. It may be higher than the budget that was set a year ago, but because they got more money in the meantime, it's not a fair comparison. So it looks like the budget is going up more than it actually is, or it looks like it's going down when it's actually going up, and so on. So one of the requests that has come through in previous years is that, as well as being able to see the year to year, the budget to budget, we should have some more information about what's the latest position on actual spending and how does that compare to the budget for what you're expecting for the years to come. So part of the change is to try to bridge that gap. What it does do, though, especially with local government, is it adds a kind of level of complications to it as well. And those complications are mainly due to the transfer of monies to local government from other portfolios, not the local government portfolio. And we set those out in the table that's in the paper. So when we're looking to do almost like a like-for-like comparison, what we've done is we've gone back to the budget information so you can see that, and then we've prepared in the appendix just both of those pieces of information side by side so you can see them. Because obviously if we just go off the APR1 and gave you that comparison, we'd be showing all of the in-year budget transactions for the latest position and none within the actual budget for the year ahead in the same way. So we wanted to present it to you in the fairest way, so we've gone with the budget to budget comparison. Both have use. For the purpose of this paper, we felt that was more useful.
Thanks, Richard. Andrew. Christina, do you have a follow-up?
No, it's okay.
Thank you. Andrew?
I think Derek was first. Joe?
Oh, I'm just you're absolutely right. Yeah. Derek?
That's okay, no worries at all. In a sense, Christine has asked one of the. I wondered if we actually knew why the government had made this change in presentation, because I think a number of people have been asking for years to get a more realistic comparison. I think one of the couple observations I have, and there is a question, and it's incredibly complex. I think you and the team are congratulated to be able to make some sense of this, because it just shows how complicated it is, and also the fact that we're already into February and councils having to set budgets for next year, and it creates an industry. It's maybe something we should raise with the Cabinet Secretary next month, because it is an industry and it's extremely complicated and it's very difficult for anybody to follow, and there's a huge amount of resource going in, not just within Audit Scotland, the Commission, but COSLA and every council in the country trying to make sense of this. And I think a lot of the challenges are the transfers from other portfolios. So the Scottish Government is not structured in a way that makes it terribly easy to follow the trail of money to local government. I wanted to also ask you about business rates or non-domestic rates. Is this something we're able to track in the context of the overall general grant to councils? Because I'm acutely aware that councils are actually one of the major payers, or the public sector as a whole is a major payer of business rates. And I did think, when you looked at it before, councils theoretically are shielded from the variations in the business rate take, but because if the overall grant goes up or down in comparison to rates, the actual grant allocation that gets the same. But somewhere within that, the amount that councils are paying in rates falls into that equation. And I know a couple of years ago, there was a view when there was the last revaluation, there was a big increase in rates, and that materialised in quite a significant additional burden from councils, which I think enabled the Scottish Government to reduce the level of general grant that they gave. So I just wonder, within your analysis, is this something we can look at maybe ahead of the budget report in May, to see how the non-domestic rates assumptions are flowing through the analysis? Because it's not just, I think the way the analysis is presented, it looks at it from a Scotland-wide perspective, but there is an implication for councils within that as well. Sorry, that's getting quite technical, because it is an absolute minefield.
Thank you very much. I'll be dead honest. I don't have the full answer to that question. So and I think if some of it is related to how is it affecting council by council, there could be opportunities to explore that within future the future budget work that the Accounts Commission does in May time. I mean, it's obviously an incredibly important area insofar as it's about understanding of the flows of income, the distribution of that flows of income, and how that relates to the funding that's coming through from the Scottish Government. Because a lot of this, maybe thinking a bit more widely as well, is about how councils as well as the Scottish Government can understand the various levers and costs at their disposal when it comes to growing the economy, fees and charges, all the rest of it, and how that differs through Scotland. I'm afraid that's a holder answer. I may pass over just to Tom just to see whether there's any more detail we can provide. If not, it's something we can pick up with Blythe and Martin in due course and see how we can feed back anything we know into future publications. I wonder, Tom, whether you have anything to add to that.
Unfortunately not, Richard. Again, non-domestic rates is something that we picked up as part of the standard the process of developing the briefing. Unfortunately, yeah, this is definitely something we can look at taking forward in the future, but again, it's not something that we have done or looked at in the past. But again, as Richard says, something we can certainly explore.
Excellent, thank you. Andrew.
Thanks very much, Joe, and thanks, Alison, Richard and Tom for the report. I certainly echo Joe's thanks for turning this all around so quickly. It's sort of a request to try and do just that, and it's really welcome to see. Just on your point, Alison, about the format, I mean, I think it all seems fine for this year, but I just wanted to follow up something, maybe just following on from Derek's point about the complexity of it all, because unless I'm misreading what's going to happen, I'm looking at paragraph 11 in particular under the context. I mean, there's going to be a UK spending review in June, which isn't unusual in itself. But I think, again, unless I'm misinterpreting what's going to happen, I think for the first time in the 7 years I've been on the Commission, that spending review at a UK level, I know we're the Accounts Commission for Scotland, but that spending review is going to provide a 3-year settlement framework. And I'm just interested to know if you've got any views about the subsequent, mentioned in paragraph 11, Scottish Government's medium-term financial plan, which obviously is under our remit as the Commission for Scotland. How are we going to address all of that? Because it's going to be, as I say, the first time I think in a long time that's going to be there, a 3-year framework. Now, and we all know what's coming up in the run-up to next year. You know, this time, 12 months' time, there's an election here in Scotland. There's going to be a lot of politicking around all of that. And I just wonder if the team's got any thoughts about how we're going to cover all of that, or are we just going to ignore the framework, or are we just going to focus on 1 year, or are we going to look ahead to the sort of years 2 and 3 of the potential 3-year framework that the UK government's going to put in place? Now, I could be wrong, none of this might happen, but I'd be amazed if it doesn't.
Thanks, Andrew. I'll kick off, and Richard or Tom may want to come in with a little with a little bit more. Certainly, I think it's fairly certain that we'll see those 3-year numbers at UK level on both resource and capital. The timing has been pushed back, but it's looking now like June. The Cabinet Secretary had previously indicated that Scotland would respond and undertake and seek to match what's looking like a clearer and more regular spending review cycle at UK level to mirror that within Scotland, which would certainly be very welcome in terms of greater medium-term certainty and planning parameters for the public sector. We don't have any clarity as yet as to exactly when Scottish ministers will bring forward the Scottish response. The Auditor General has been repeating calls for the medium-term financial strategy to be updated and brought forward as quickly as possible. And certainly we will be anticipating through Richard's team in the first instance of public finances to be ready to respond to whatever comes through. It's hard for us to specify what that will look like at the moment without knowing yet exactly what the Scottish Government response is going to look like, and also the level of detail that will be provided by the Scottish Government in terms of that resource and capital spending review. The resource spending review that Scottish ministers did undertake in 2022 was at a fairly high level. So we would hope that we would get greater granularity of detail in terms of the local government plans over that period. And certainly we would be very happy to come back to the Commission with a briefing on the Scottish Government's publication in the first instance, and then we could consider what further work may be required. Just coming back on a couple of Derek's points as well on non-domestic rates, I think there is potentially a bit of a gap in some of the work that we've been doing for you. It's been focusing very much on spending, and there's something more that we can pick up in the March strategy seminar on revenue generation. Non-domestic rates is obviously a bit of a strange one as to the extent to which it's a local or national tax, and we won't get into that today, but it's absolutely fundamental to how the local government settlement is reached, and what council, the spending power that councils have available to them.
Yeah, thanks. That's all.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A really excellent and very helpful report, as others have said. I just want to focus in on one part of it. Paragraph 29 says that there isn't explicit funding to cover the shortfall as a result of the council tax freeze last year. I just wondered, one, is there any update on that? And two, is it possible to quantify what that shortfall might be? Thanks.
I can come in with a Richard might want to add to it. I think we're still trying to get to the bottom in terms of the published documents as to exactly the position. I know from my role prior to joining Audit Scotland that the intention was very much that the funding that the government provided for the council tax fees in 24-25 would be baselined. But I think it's been harder for us to trace that through the published documents this year. What it does mean is that the council tax base that councils are setting council tax rates for 25-26 on is effectively the 23-24 tax base. So this was one of the issues that came through in terms of getting that agreement on the council tax freeze for 24-25, that it was, I suppose, eroding to some extent the tax raising powers. So that does remain the case, that councils are effectively setting uplifts on the 23-24 tax base.
Thanks.
Jennifer?
I think Mike is in the queue ahead of me.
I'm looking at number 2 thinking even, so yeah.
Thanks very much. I mean, I think it's an invaluable report, and it feels to me as if it's public but not published, as it were, because it's part of the meeting material and therefore on the public domain, but we haven't, we're not doing anything very much to propagate it. And some of it, I think it would be valuable to do that. Having said that, Alison at the last meeting when we did the finance bulletin noted that there's a need to look again a bit about at the timing, articulation and content of the various financial products that we have. And I think what the questions Andrew was raising about, well, actually, this is a particular year, means that maybe we need to consider it even more fundamentally for this year, so that in terms of our contribution to assessing financial sustainability of councils, that we actually get our view on that out there as soon as is feasible, given the UK and Scottish level multi-year work. I had one specific question for Richard and Tom, I suppose, which is there anything in Exhibit 1 that Scottish Government themselves couldn't produce in a table when they published the budget, and therefore provide a degree of transparency for everybody from the outset? And a second question, for those who remember Donald Rumsfeld's known unknowns and unknown unknowns, when we look at in-year additions, this seems to include the known unknowns. And yet every year it's a really big chunk that goes on top of the budget. How much is this of the amounts that change during the year, and how much is which is unknown as to what might be added or indeed taken away, I guess? Because I think I'd like to understand where the remaining uncertainty is, both about the figures and in local government about what they're getting.
Do you mind if I start? And I may hand over to Tom in a minute if there's any of the details, especially about that the second part of the question, if that's okay. So if we'll take it as a compliment that Exhibit 1 is a clear articulation of the different funding that's available. So this is taken from public information. So technically anyone could provide that information. So we have conversations with the Scottish Government, so we can raise with them in terms of their presentation whether that's helpful. But we will continue, whether it's in this format or whatever, to present it to the Accounts Commission in the clearest possible format we can to understand the differences between the funding streams and where it's coming from and how it's changed. I think it's a fair point on the in-year, and I think in some ways it probably relates back to previous questions about what comes next. So what we've had over the last few years, although it feels like a lifetime ago now, especially during COVID-19, there were absolutely huge swings in funding in the year, and we've actually had, you know, echoes of that up until and including the October budget of the UK government budget, about how the amounts in the year are changing. So a lot of focus, understandably, has been on in-year movements and trying to work out what are the known unknowns, so to speak. I think it would be quite difficult to analyse from the last few years exactly what an expectation around that may be. Having said that, I think it also links through to the last question, which was about the better planning for the medium term. So one of the things that Audit Scotland, both in the, and the Accounts Commission publications and Auditor General publications, have been saying is the importance of being able to plan to therefore minimise and mitigate the need for large in-year movements. So this year is going to be an active one, and we're geared for it, both in the public finances team, but in all parts of Audit Scotland. We know we've got the UK level spending review. We also know that there'll be the Scottish Government response to that. We want to keep an eye on how things are developing with the Verity House agreement and local government fiscal framework and where that's up to, as well as what we are aware of in terms of the ongoing public services reform work and the summit at the end of February and oncoming work that we'd expect in the rest of the year. So part of the question is that the more stability and understanding that you can have over the medium term position and the less volatility, the less the in-year movements become, or the more manageable they become. But there is that difficulty in being able to assess exactly what would be a reasonable expectation of what those in-year movements are, which is what sometimes makes public finances so difficult. But I wonder, Tom, if I could pass to you if there's anything you'd like to add or highlight from that.
Yeah, of course. I think, as we mentioned in Annex A, of course, there's been this change to how the budget is presented. So again, so for 24-25, it is now presented at the ABR position, which includes a lot of these business as usual transfers, but also includes quite a significant amount of unanticipated additional funding that was provided to local government in order to fund things like pay deals. At the moment, it's extremely difficult to separate out those two things because they have effectively just been treated as a single block. It's very difficult to trace through other documentation what exactly that is new funding and what amount of that is funding that was anticipated at when the budget was set and is simply being transferred in year. But yes, as Richard's saying, it's extremely difficult to anticipate exactly what additional funding might come through to local government during the course of the year. So for the spring budget revision, which came out earlier this week, there's a sort of approximately 56 million, I think, for additional pay for teachers. Again, this wasn't anticipated funding. This is new funding that's been provided by the Scottish Government to cover something that's arisen in year, and so it wasn't anticipated at the start. Again, it's very difficult to understand, especially over the past couple of years when the amounts that have been provided to local government in year have been quite significant at times. It's difficult to anticipate that, unfortunately.
If I could just add briefly, Joe, and thanks to Tom and to Richard for those answers, that I think there's been an exceptional level of in-year monies coming through from the UK government to the Scottish Government in recent years, which has made the last couple of years we've had for quite a number of years this issue about baseline transfers between portfolios taking place in year, creating some challenges in terms of presentation, and to an extent councils can anticipate those more. But to link back to the point that Andrew made, we would hope that if we're getting into a more stable position of planned public finances, we wouldn't see the same quantum of unplanned funding adjustments, which I say have really been driven in a lot of cases by the way that funding for pay settlements has come through from at UK government level and through down to Scottish Government. But pay may also be an issue that we would want to return to with the Commission in the near future.
Jennifer?
Just a really quick question. I really liked Exhibit 3 in your report. I thought it was very helpful to see the kind of monies against the areas of our sort of wider work programme. And I just wondered if there's any update on the reform 30 million. You said in your notes that there wasn't any detail yet about how that could be applied for. And I'm interested to understand, is it in scope for local government to apply for that, or don't we know yet?
I don't know the details of that yet, unless Tom does. I believe there'll be some kind of application process, but I may just hand over to Tom to see whether he can help with any further information.
Thank you.
Yes, there we have had sight of the application form that the Scottish Government's produced. I think it only came through early this week, so we've not had much time to sort of go through it properly. I don't want to say for sure whether it definitely excludes local government. However, I do recall seeing on there that any joint projects that portfolios in the Scottish Government might want to undertake with local government are particularly welcomed under the rules of the application. Again, beyond that, we don't have.
Thank you.
Yeah, beyond that, we still don't have too much information beyond the fact that it's 30 million resource and capital funding is outside the scope of the fund.
Angela.
Thanks, and again, just a quick one, Jo. Given that we're now, early February and budgets will be an advanced state for agreement in councils, do we have any indication of the likely increases in council tax? Sorry.
I'm afraid I don't know that anything about that. I'm afraid. What I do know is that the Cabinet Secretary said when she was discussing the 144 million to support the NICs was that that would be the equivalent of around a 5% council tax increase if if a council were to put it up. So there's obviously perhaps a link between what's available now additionally for the national insurance contribution increases and expectations around council tax, but how that will actually then translate on the ground into what councils themselves decide to do will be up to them to decide.
Thank you. Thanks. Again, a good debate, and clearly indicates a kind of a desire for this type of work to help our general thinking around the context. So thank you, and again, thanks for getting out so soon. And I'm pretty sure we'll be coming back for more insights into some of the key aspects of it. So thanks, Alison and Richard and Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Then takes us to item 9, which is any other public business. Is there anything else that any commission members wish to raise in the public session? So on that basis, I'll ask for the recording to stop. And I'll ask commission members to come back at 1:15. Okay. Thanks very much.